What's up, VC? What's up, music fans? Chris the Groove Seeker here, back with another video. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. 1996, 30 years ago. Wow. Just thinking about 2026 rolling in, you start to do some math and you think about this, there's some key anniversaries that come about throughout music history. And for me, 1996 is just a massive year, massive influence on me. So I want to speak and show you guys some of the records from 1996 that I have in my collection and talk about those albums. Plenty of records that were amazing that year that I don't have on vinyl, so I'm not going to talk about those. I'll let you guys leave in the comments. I know there's some key ones missing that I love that I just haven't picked up or prefer to stream or have a CD, something like that. But 1996 was an interesting time for me. So I turned 12 that year. And at that point already pretty obsessed with music for a couple of years, old stuff, new stuff, current stuff, kind of learning as I can. And I had a very awesome experience as a child at that time. And upon reflection, obviously I wasn't aware of this at the time, but upon reflection, I really feel like this is the last or towards the end of the last era before pop music went from a description to a sound, in my opinion. This is a couple of years before the whole boy band thing broke, a couple of years before R&B hooks get introduced into hip hop, a couple of years before really, mass produced kind of generic pop music. I know I sound like an elitist there, but that's just the way I see it. Of course, there's been bubblegum pop and things like that from the 50s on forward, but I think that was always carved out as its own place. I think in the 90s, things kind of got blurred and kind of got funky. Obviously, a ton of novelty songs in the 90s as well, which kind of fall into that category. But I just remember 1996 being such a great time, and a lot of early music memories are really anchored in that year. There was some before, but I was still a little bit too young maybe to remember those. But like I said, I was already collecting music, into music, listening to music, and I had a few things going for me. Number one, I grew up in the New York suburbs. So one of the dominant sources of this information or this musical journey was New York radio at the time. If you are from the tri-state area, maybe even New England, you might know that radio is much different in the 90s. I feel like that was the last golden age for me as well. But there was three key stations that were happening that we all had access to. Number one is Z100, which is now a massive pop music station. But at the time, they were playing all the alternative rock and hip hop and indie, etc. of the day. They were a little bit more focused on what they were playing. Probably coincided more with MTV at the time, but certainly a huge influence. It was great to listen to the radio back then and record songs off the radio and whatnot. Second thing is New York was pretty much the epicenter of hip hop radio. I know maybe 106 on the West Coast had a presence, but Hot 97 was there. They were playing mostly hip hop, rap, and R&B. There is key morning shows and afternoon shows that gave you access to the artists, but also, they'd have a countdown every day of the top hip hop tracks. And it wasn't always the stuff on MTV either. It was kind of going deeper, especially for East Coast bias, which was great to experience. And as the West Coast grew, that came into play as well. And then lastly was 92.3 K-Rock, alternative rock station. This was the radio station that Howard Stern on in the morning. So I think he went on to like 10 or 11. And then after that, it was alternative rock. And it was a little bit deeper than Z100, obviously. Of course, you heard Pearl Jam and Nirvana and all that stuff, but you got more into Tool, Weezer, Rage Against the Machine, all the great indie bands at the time. I'm not going to list them all, but you got, if you were around, you guys know what I'm talking about. So that was the first major benefit. Second major benefit is I got really blessed with childhood friends that were also equally obsessed with music, and I think most of them still are now, and still seek out new music. And we all kind of went on our different paths as we got older, but we were all into the same stuff. We all talked about the same stuff. We all traded the same stuff, listened to the same stations. And some of them had parents that were pretty hip as well. Parents that were coming up in the college radio era of the 80s and grabbed on to the 90s alternative scene and kind of qualified that it was okay for us to listen to it, or reinforced that, like, yeah, this is really good music. So it wasn't just like, oh, this is my kids' music. Like, they were involved with it too. So I had that benefit as well. And you kind of had a circle. We were into other things, obviously, sports and whatnot, but we were all pretty tight and shared a lot of that musical experience. Third advantage I had, aunts and uncles that were hugely influential, and I was the oldest grandchild. I'm the oldest grandchild, and maybe one of two grandchildren that were around for a while without any others. And my aunts and uncles were pretty young at the time, so they were influencing my taste as well, and listening to the same radio stations I was listening to, turning me on to stuff based upon what I liked. So you kind of take that influence as well. And the last piece is my elementary grade school bus ride was like 45 minutes long. I went to a small school, and it was like two or three buses in my entire town to take the kids to that school. So I had headphones, I had tapes, and I was just able to explore music both to and from school almost 2 hours a day. Also be able to get the radio on my Walkman and whatnot. So certainly like a lot of time spent kind of escaping to those songs on the radio, investigating albums. Obviously, there was no internet, but I think around this time is when I got a subscription to the Rolling Stone. I started reading Source magazine for hip hop news. I'm not sure if Spin was around. I think it probably was, but there were some other things at like local bookstores and newsstands that I could maybe not purchase, but I'd kind of hang out in the store and read up on and just kind of note names and albums and go out and discover them. So for me, in my lifetime, this is the most important year of music. What was released, I know there was better albums and better years, but like the concentration of what was going on, the pop culture surrounding it, and like the age that I came across all this stuff was, widely influential on my tastes. So today, what I'm going to do for you is I have a box here of records that were released in 1996 that I own. I'm going to pull them up and talk. I'm going to freestyle like I normally do. It might be a long video, it might be a short video. We'll see how it goes. But without further ado, I'll kick it off. So let's see. First record. Okay. First one is Jamiroquai's Traveling Without Moving. I guess I was more into the hits of Jamiroquai at the time. I know Virtual Insanity was on MTV quite a bit. Pretty fascinated by that music video. I did not have this album when I was a kid. This was more of like, hey, we saw it on MTV, we heard it on the radio, it was a great song. I don't really think we recognized the greatness until later on. I also feel like at that age, it was not typical for kids to be listening to this. But as I got older into high school and college, and you go back on the Jamiroquai as a band, you start to realize how insanely good they are. And I think they actually hold up and were pretty much ahead of their time and pretty influential on a lot of artists today. So this came out in 1996, but I did not get into it until later on. All right, second record. Let's see. Oh, there's going to be a lot of hip hop on this list, which I think is something we need more of in the VC. The Roots, Illadelph Half-Life. This is their second record. The first one I think was kind of like an underground movement, but the key track here, even if you're not a hip hop fan, is what they do. I mean, it really exemplifies how talented they were as a band. I did have this on CD. A lot of these were hidden because of parental advisory. But yeah, this was a great record. This has stuck with me. I even had What They Do on 99-cent maxi single cassette, which I got at Camelot Records at the time, or Camelot Music, I guess it was called. But The Roots, Illadelph Half-Life, hugely, hugely awesome album. And it's great to see how they evolved, what they've become, and where they are now. I never saw it coming. And little known fact on here, and he's not on the album cover, which I find strange, but Scott Storch, famous producer, was actually the keyboard player in the touring band, and then later did studio work with them on the next one or two albums. So The Roots, Illadelph Half-Life, highly recommended. Let's see. Okay. Classic here, Stone Temple Pilots. Tiny Music from the Vatican. Gift Shop. This I just got actually. I have a MoFi of it, but I did a private, or not a private. We did a shootout with Jason Rojas after a stream one night, and this anniversary edition like blew away the OG and really had a a leg up on the mobile fidelity. In my opinion, I have the mobile fidelity as well. Big Bang Baby is probably the biggest one on here. Tripping on a hole in a paper heart was another one. My uncle was heavily into Stone Temple Pilots, so this was totally a rage out album for me. I think I had like a dubbed copy on cassette of this. Got the CD later, years later, and then picked up the vinyl recently. If you see this anniversary edition, it's been going on sale, or if you can get it used, I would totally cop it. It's got some great bonus material and live material, and for my ears, from what I heard, I just thought it sounded the best out of the versions that we listened to. So STP for everybody. Let's see. Probably the album I listened to the most in 1996. For me, I think in retrospect, it's probably not the best album, but as a kid, I thought it was, and that's the Fugees, The Score. This is a huge crossover sensation. This was played on every radio station, VH1, MTV, BET. Played "Killing Me Softly" and "Ready or Not" around the clock. I remember getting this maybe at like a Caldor. I don't know if you guys remember that department store or something else, but I wore this tape out. I eventually got the CD. I destroyed and wore that thing out over the years. I have a good friend who, if we put this album on, I mean, from the intros to the skits, I mean, word for word, we know this by heart. Unfortunately, they split up pretty much after this album. Lauryn Hill went on to record Miseducation. Wyclef had a pretty big solo album, I think like 2 years later, and Pras, he had a solo album and did some other work, but I don't know if it was as popular as the other two. But this is a Stone Cold classic. This is another one where it's like there's crossover appeal here. I remember like my mom listening to "Killing Me Softly" because it's a Roberta Flack cover and being like, "Oh, I know that song." And then, kids who weren't even into hip hop or were hardcore into hip hop like loving this album. So this was just so huge at the time. It was everywhere, and really important one for 1996. Oh, yes. Fiona Apple, Title. What can I say about this? This was something I kind of got side-eyed for listening to as a kid. Like, oh, you like that female singer? I think this album beyond holds up. I think she's an absolute genius. I look forward to everything she releases. Shadow Boxers, just one of my favorite songs of all time. I think this is the Vinyl Me Please version, which is at double 45. Sounds fantastic. I'm just glad that they put this out on wax. Slow Like Honey's a killer song. Obviously, the lead track on here, Sleep to Dream, was a big hit. Again, lots of MTV play. Not much more I can say about this record. Just killer album. Yeah. Nas, It Was Written. So this was bought around the time that I bought a few other hip hop albums that I'm going to be showing tonight. And this is his follow up. This is arguably one of the greatest sophomore albums in hip hop history. This is coming off Illmatic in 1994. I knew some of the songs on Illmatic. I was way too young to own it and get into it. But when It Was Written came out, went back and got into Illmatic. And I'm not sure there's a better 1-2 punch in hip hop history than those first two albums. And I think that's a little bit of a theme with some other records I'm going to show from other genres in 1996. The message on here is awesome and samples a Sting song. Street Dreams was all over MTV. Had like that casino parody of a video. Affirmative Action was a really big hit on this. This was also huge because Dr. Dre was featured on this album, and it was like this whole East Coast West Coast thing, and he kind of broke that down and didn't care. For my East Coast heads, actually my hip hop heads, this is a classic. I don't know if I'd recommend this to someone who's not into hip hop. I think that's more for the Fugees for you to discover, or the Roots, but this is essential. This is, I don't know what, top 50 hip hop albums of all time easily. This is an OG too. It's got a little cutout. I found this a few years ago, sealed. and the vinyl was in really good shape. I got a steal on it. I know they've reissued it since, but I thought it was pretty cool to have an OG on this because it wasn't in print at that time, the reissue. Okay. More hip hop. Outkast, ATLiens, MTV, Elevators was the single that they were playing nonstop. I mean, just look at this album cover. It's absolutely wild. Comic book, futuristic alien. To me, it's a play on Funkadelic a little bit. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or not, but it's certainly something that kind of plays to that psychedelic Afro funk fusion soul of the 70s. This is a killer album. They just got inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. So many hits on here. This is actually an album where I would recommend it to somebody who's not into hip hop but is into kind of psychedelic funk jazz music. I'm not saying that's what this is, but I feel like it's a distant cousins of it. This absolutely blew our minds. The first album I wasn't so into. I think this is like the Nas. I heard this and went back, and then obviously you had Aquemini, Stankonia come out, and Speaker Box Love Below. This is one of the most perfect careers in music history. I mean, this is just a killer record. So, Outkast, ATLiens. It's always a tongue twister to say that one. I always feel like I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to do a twofer on this one. I'll just grab the other one. So, actually, I don't have the other one. I do have it, but I won't show it. So, 1996, Tupac passes away in September. First record was All Eyes on Me, which is a hip hop double album. I have that. I forgot to pull it. I should have showed it. But then after he passes, Machiavelli, Don Columinati, and the 7 Day Theory. Pac is one of my favorite artists, bar none. He's my favorite rapper, hip hop artist, one of my top 5 or 10 favorite artists of any musical genre. This was crazy. I mean, there was so much crazy imagery and lyrics about this. There were so many conspiracies about, is he dead? Is he not dead? You know, kind of like a play on the Elvis thing. There were so many hidden messages in his lyrics. This was probably the last Pac album that really had his fingerprint on it. They released stuff later on, like Are You Still Down was pretty raw, but then like stuff after Are You Still Down was obviously produced by so many people and had opinions of other people involved. So this record's killer. I wish I pulled All Eyes on Me. That's my bad. I meant to show both of them, but hey, R.I.P. to one of the GOATs. All right. This record I was not into, didn't know anything about it, came across it years later. They quickly became one of my favorite bands, especially in my early 20s. Still listen to them quite a bit. I'm always excited when they release something, but this is Belle and Sebastian's If You're Feeling Sinister. I guess I don't even know if this was a big track when it came out, but like Dylan in the Movies, which is an awesome pop tune. The key lyric is, and don't look back, like Dylan in the Movies, after the Bob Dylan documentary by D.A. Pennebaker. What can you say about Belle and Sebastian? I think like we're going to look back on these guys, especially the height of their records like this and Tiger Milk, and forgot what the other one is. That's really big. Going to look back at them and really think they were probably underrated at the time. Indie, right? Like indie folk pop rock. Had a little bit of a cult following. Obviously, High Fidelity probably springboarded these guys into a little bit more of the mainstream with some of the references there. This was on Matador, I believe. Yeah, Matador Records in New York. So, still releasing music. I think like once every 2 years or so, they put something out. I jump right on it. I mean, this early stuff is classic and kind of the benchmark, but even their later catalog resonates with me. So, Belle and Sebastian, If You're Feeling Sinister. What a great album cover, too. That orange red hue, and just really awesome. All right, what's next? Oh, another band that I was not aware of this band until their next album, Summer Teeth. But here's Wilco's Being There. This is the deluxe anniversary edition. A few years later, I guess in 97 or 98, Summer Teeth came out. That's when I first got exposed to them. Eventually went back to the first two records. Eventually learned about Uncle Tupelo, and eventually learned about Sun Volt and all those guys. And then from Summer Teeth on, obviously that's my Wilco era. Ghost is Born, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, etc. So I had no recollection of this. I mean, maybe it was on MTV or something like that at the time. It certainly wasn't on New York radio. Misunderstood's on here. Out of Sight, Out of Mind. Sunken Treasure. Kingpin, which is a killer tune. Just a really awesome record. This is the deluxe edition that came out in 2017. It's got four LPs, alternative versions, the album, live stuff. So I'm a big Wilco fan. Every time they put one of these album deluxe editions out, I always pick it up for all the bonus material. All right, we're getting there, guys. Bear with me. Just a few more. Appreciate you guys sticking it out. What can you say about this? Rage Against the Machine, Evil Empire. I have vivid memories of this having obviously punk attitude and influence. There was a bunch of like skater kids in my neighborhood. Saw the video for Bulls on Parade, but didn't really know much about the album. Quickly acquired this on cassette once I heard it playing in the neighborhood. People of the Sun, Year of the Boomerang. Didn't know what they were talking about at the time, but you go back and especially as you get into college, you read the lyrics and understand some of the messaging they have is pretty remarkable. On the back, pictures of Mumia, or in the liner notes, pictures of Mumia Abdul-Jamal, Malcolm X, Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, which is a key book I read in college, which I really enjoyed. So, yeah, what can you say about this? This holds up, man. This is one of the great power catalogs of all time. All of their records are just absolutely killer. Even the covers record that they did. So, Rage Against the Machine, Evil Empire. All right. That's another classic. Sublime, self-titled Sublime. I think a lot of the Sublime purists will say 40 Ounces to Freedom is better, some of their other stuff, but this obviously was the one that catapulted them right around the time Bradley passed away. What I Got is on here, Santeria. I forgot what the other singles are. I honestly would have never owned this on vinyl. I think it's just something that I've heard so much that I was okay not having, but I think Vinyl Me Please did this version a few years ago, and it was obviously a nice to have, a no-brainer, but I wouldn't have gone out of my way. I've streamed this enough. Garden Grove, right? This is just a killer record. I remember like them and 311. I'm not saying they're similar, but I remember them kind of being popular at the same time, getting a lot of MTV play with that 311 record with the Blue Album. But I took to these guys more, just cool. I don't know what you call it. It's got a little bit of punk, a little bit of reggae, SoCal rock, I guess. But everybody knows this iconic record. And when I worked in the music store, even 10, 15 years later, this still just sold like crazy all the time. People always coming in for it. So Sublime. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, this is a close second to the Fugees as far as hip hop album of the year. This is Ghostface Killer, Iron Man. I guess I don't know if this was critically acclaimed at the time. I know that everybody was kind of waiting on bated breath. The first Wu-Tang album had come out. Jizza Liquid Swords came out. Method Man Tikal had come out. Raekwon the Purple Tape had come out, and like you didn't think you'd ever get another Wu-Tang album again. So like the solo albums had such high anticipation. What blew my mind about this is, you guys should go watch this video. The music video for Daytona 500 was like this crazy like speed racer animation, and that's the track that uses Bob James's Nautilus. It might be the sample that kind of got Bob James all that notoriety. I know he gets sampled a ton since and before then, but I feel like that's the one that everybody kind of looks to as kind of the springboard into his relevance to hip hop. Like I said, even though his stuff has been used before. And then also Winter Wars was just an absolute hip hop banger as well. But this is a really, really dope record. If you're into hip hop and haven't heard this, Ghostface, most of Ghostface catalogs is phenomenal, but the first two records, Iron Man and Supreme Clientele, total total tens in my opinion. This I remember having around the same time as the second Tupac record that came out that year, the Machiavelli record, and just constantly rotating two different styles, completely different sounds, but was super heavy into this and still put it on once in a while. I love it. This is good in the car too when I'm by myself. And then I turn it down at traffic lights so no one thinks I'm crazy. But yeah, this is Ghostface Iron Man. All right, couple more. All right, last hip hop one. I don't think this got the credit it deserved until years later. This is also another situation where you were kind of waiting on bated breath for the next album to come out. This is De La Soul's Stakes is High. This is also a Vinyl Me Please reissue, and Vinyl Me Please was great. Was not into it at the time. I think I knew about 3 Feet High and Rising and listened to it. I don't think I was really aware of this when it came out. I think I got back into them on their next album when they had that single with Redman. I think that's on the 3rd record or 4th record. And then you kind of go back and listen to this. So I didn't own this until probably in high school. But this came out in 1996, and a lot of people think it's one of their best records. I tend to agree. I celebrate De La Soul as kind of one catalog outside of 3 Feet High and Rising. I think 3 Feet High and Rising's on a pedestal, and the others just kind of fall in line. And it's just one of these situations where I look at the catalog holistically with some artists, and De La Soul is one of them. So De La Soul, Stakes is High. Trying to be as random as possible so you get unfiltered thoughts here. All right, last 3. What can you say about this record? I mean, this absolutely blew my mind. Beck Odelay. Of course, Loser off Mellow Gold was so popular a few years before. I know he has stuff before that. 11, 12 years old. I'm not getting exposed to underground Beck at that time, so I'm really relying on what's on the radio and what's on MTV. Devil's Haircut, and Where It's At. To this day, excuse me, if I hear Where It's At, radio is cranked, and it's a don't touch that dial situation. I think the coolest thing about Beck for me, and I think some of my friends when we were kids, was us kind of being in suburban New York, being exposed to hip hop culture on the fringes, listening to hip hop, loving hip hop, but having an affinity for rock and roll or rock music or alternative music, and Beck was just so soulful and blended the two. It was perfect for the wheelhouse that we were in. I mean, this is what, let's talk about it in the comments, perhaps, but this has got to be top 25, top 50 albums of the 90s easily. I mean, this is absolute killer, at least from my opinion, and from a pop music perspective. I know I'm going to get a million people that are going to comment on indie stuff and punk stuff I never heard of and whatnot. That's fine, but you guys kind of know where my tastes are after seeing this video. Very very mainstream at the time, and still pretty mainstream. That's okay. Last 2, Alice in Chains Unplugged. Jumped on this when it got released. I think it got released in 96. I hope so because it's on the list. This is the Music on Vinyl reissue. The thing about MTV Unplugged, where the Nirvana thing took it to a whole new level, the Clapton one, whatever, there was no YouTube. There wasn't, I don't think these were available on VHS. From what I recall, they may have been. For us, it was looking at the TV guide or the TV info station and saying when is there going to be an MTV Unplugged on, and then it was usually at 1 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't like they played it at Friday night at 7 and it was this big deal, at least from what I can remember. I know everybody loves the Nirvana one, and I do too. If Nirvana's 1A, this is 1B for me. I think this performance is absolutely incredible. Every track on here is absolutely stunning. I think they picked a really great set list, and the way they come out and do Nutshell, Brother, No Excuses, I mean, that is just an incredible way to start the show. I later got this on DVD. I think I still have it. But just a phenomenal performance. So, Alice in Chains Unplugged. And then last but not least, I think there's going to be people out here that say this is the best album in 1996. I think there's a lot of people that are going to say it to kind of troll. I think there's a lot of people that are going to say it to because it got, from what I remember, mixed feelings when it came out, and it's become an absolute classic, and that's Weezer's Pinkerton. The great debate is Blue or Pinkerton. You have the Pinkerton camp, you have the Blue camp. To me, they're both 10 out of 10, and they serve different purposes. It's hard to follow up something like Blue with all of those hits, all the popularity it had. I think this album holds up to Blue. Obviously, El Scorcho's on here, The Good Life, Butterfly. I mean, I can go on. Tired of Sex. Across. I mean, this front to back. This is like a perfect record. If this was the debut, I think it's maybe not as popular as Blue as it was, but I think it gets the critical acclaim. I just remember people thinking this was a little bit of a flop, and then the third record, I still liked up and through Maladroit. I was a really big fan. Just really lacked based upon the benchmark to Blue, which is unfortunate. So, but Weezer Pinkerton is an absolute classic. This is the Mobile Fidelity. I think I have the VMP version as well. I don't really know if there's a good sounding version of this album. I mean, I don't really care either. I'm just glad I have it on wax, and I can drop the needle on it whenever I like. So, look, that's my take on 1996. I think some of the key albums I'm leaving out: Tool, Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, DJ Shadow Introducing, which I can't believe I don't own on vinyl. I think Maxwell Urban Hangout Suite, if that's the title. I think that was 1996. That's an absolute classic. And I'm sure there's a ton more. Like I said, this was really focused on the records that were in my collection that I like. For me, in my lifetime, 1996, musically, culturally, I guess that benchmark, I think it's the greatest year in music that I've been alive. I know it might be a controversial statement, and I know a lot of people are going to have opinions on that, but you got to remember, I'm born in 84. I don't really remember the 80s, and the early 90s is tough for me. So 1996 on, 95, 96 on is where I'm at, where it's at. And then I think, like I said earlier in the video, you come to the late 90s, early 2000s, I think there's a nosedive in what's popular and accessible to everybody. So I feel like this is the last of a golden age of a certain time in music, from just a cultural standpoint of everybody kind of listening to everything and being into everything, and it being on MTV and radio and all that stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave your comments. Looking forward to the next discussion or next video with you guys. I appreciate everybody watching, and have a good night.